Once again, thank you for joining us. We will be getting started here momentarily. We're waiting on a few others to join the call. If you are joining us by YouTube, thank you for participating. Your live stream should be rolling now, and we'll be getting started shortly. Mr. Roadcap, are you able to be on the line with us, and are you able to talk?
I am speaking now, so hopefully you can hear me.
We can hear you. Great. Technology is on our side today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, now that we have everyone here and ready, I believe we'll begin the webinar. For sake of time, I'd like to make sure we get started on time so that way we can adjourn on time as well. So once again, thank you so much for joining us for the COVID WARN webinar. This is week 3 in our meetings. If you have not been joining us so far, welcome. And if you've come back again with us for a second time or third, we greatly appreciate that. Just some housekeeping items we'll cover here shortly is if you are connecting by Zoom, you have a few ways in which you can communicate with the panelists and ask questions or provide input with regards to what your utility is doing. The first is the chat, second is a raised hand, and a third is the question and answer box. They should be located along the bottom and or very top of your screen. When you are chatting with us today, we do ask that you change your setting from all panelists to be all panelists and attendees. This will allow you to see other responses and post your information out for not just the panelists to view, but for the collective group to learn from. If you have a lengthy question that you'd like to ask and something that may need response at a later time, please post that in the question and answer box. by clicking on type your question here and then pressing the send button in the lower corner. Additionally, if you're not able to connect through Zoom, you should be seeing us through the YouTube live stream that is connected now. There is a chat box as well on YouTube Live, and so if you have a question and would like to get some information and feedback, please post that into your chat box. Today's webinar will be recorded, and a link will be placed on our website for the recorded version. Please feel free to come back and refer to that as well as the other webinars we've had earlier. And now I will get it started by turning it over to our panelists. We're ready to go.
All right, I want to thank everybody for joining us. I apologize about the any background noise you may hear here. So my name is Ike. I'm one of the Virginia Warren co-chairs. I've got my other co-chair on, Mike Lynn. Our chair-elect, Scott Shirley, is on also. And then we have Dwayne Roadcap with VDH ODW. And then we have Jeff Steers with Virginia Department of Environmental Quality. So, and Geneva, of course, you just heard her. She's on here as well, trying to keep us all straight. Okay. So I want to welcome everybody that's able to take the time out today to be here. It's very appreciated. Any other state agencies that are on, we thank you for listening in. All of our utilities, definitely a big thank you. This is important. This is what we're here for, is for you guys. Any additional Virginia utility partners that might be out there, whether you're a consultant or small utility or supplier, we appreciate you being on to help hear the concerns and help give us some guidance on some places we can go and how we can get some things fixed. So our current situational report, just we start all of our progresses out like this. Currently what we're tracking is our last update from CDC was that they recommend that everybody wear masks. We've got some information that was shared about where to get some masks. We got some stuff from Etsy. Etsy.com that was shared with us. And then we have Jim Cherry from Virginia Beach shared quite a few different sites. We weren't able to get them into the slideshow, but I'll talk about them as we go on about where to get some masks and some additional PPEs to assist. We have VDH update that will show you their health slide. And we'll get some guidance from Dwayne Roadcap on some things that ODW is doing around utilities. DEQ with Jeff Steers. He's going to help us out with some information, and then I'm going to let Jeff talk. Excuse me, I'm getting all tripped up here. I'm going to let Scott talk a little bit about some VOC stuff that came out, and then we talked with DPOR with Tricia Henshaw over at DPOR, and she's going to be on one of our panelists next week. Well, one of the things that she would like to make sure everybody's tracking is on their webpage, they're giving guidance to operators who are expiring during this quarantine period or the stay-at-home period, different ways to do CEUs, and then when people will be able to sit again for tests from the end of the date. They don't have those projected dates yet, but from the end of the date of the order of stay-at-home, when we can get back in to start the testing process. Okay. So here's our health map as of this morning. You see our numbers are still increasing. 6,500 reported cases. So far, we're at 195 deaths here in Virginia. And the next slide will kind of show some emphasis on this. Our next slide is our University of Washington slide. So this one from last week, we were looking at around April 20th, and now it looks they're kind of pushing the peak out to closer to around April 27th. But if you notice, based off last week's slide that we pulled, the peak itself is not as high. They're bringing the peak down a little bit. We were up over the 5,000 mark, and now we're down around more around that 4,500 for the all beds available and all the needs, and then we're down around that 1,500 mark of what they're expecting their impact to be, what they anticipate they'll need. So this is actually looking pretty good for us. It's starting to level out some. Does anybody want to speak to this slide besides me?
No, we're good.
Okay. All right. Next slide, please. So right now with warrant updates, we don't have any new requested updates. One thing I would ask is we have that poll question about who is a warrant member and who's not. If we can go ahead and post that one out there. And I'll give you guys a few minutes to speak on that. And then Dwayne, after I get done with this part, if you would like to speak on ODW's behalf, and then Jeff, if you want to give any updates after Dwayne. Okay, so roughly 44% of the people on the call, or excuse me, 50% of the people on the call are members of the WARN, 33% are not. We have information out there on how to become a WARN member, and we'll talk about that as we go through, and we'll have some information at the end. If you don't know if you're a WARN member, on the facing page for the WARN, there's a link of those, or not a link, but there's a list of those people that are out there that are a member. So this is looking good. We're getting more and more people involved. I'm going to ask Dwayne Roadcap from ODW if he wants to speak on anything towards the utilities right now. We had talked about some of the stuff they're doing around the sanitary survey. Dwayne, did you want to touch base on that?
Sure, Ike. Thank you. So Dwayne Roadcap with the Virginia Department of Health Office of Drinking Water. To give everyone a little bit of focus, the things that ODW is doing on a daily and weekly basis varies. So on a daily basis, one of the things that I do is I report into the Emergency Support Function 3, which is water, wastewater, working with DEQ, DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation on the dam safeties. And what we're mainly looking at is do we have any high absenteeism, and do we have any shortages of supplies that is impacting business? And so I report on that daily. And the other things that we're doing on a weekly basis is that the Region 3 states, which includes Pennsylvania, Maryland, Delaware, and West Virginia, we meet as a Region 3 once a week with EPA Region 3, and we do a walkthrough of what each state is seeing or not seeing, and seeing whether we need any kind of shared resources and things like that. And so on a weekly basis, we're meeting with the EPA and the other region states. And so if anyone needs to get information or wants to have some discussion at the EPA level or with the other states agencies, just let me know, send me an email, call me, and I can put that on the radar for you as a discussion topic in a larger setting. Also, if you're having any immediate impacts that you feel like the Virginia Department of Emergency Management needs to be involved in, again, you can reach out to me, and I can make that happen and get you some assistance through that venue as well. So the other things that I've been doing is Ike and I have been having some fairly routine conversations each week as well, preparing for this Virginia WARN webinar and having some discussions of what Ike is hearing and what the WARN is hearing. And so that kind of conversation is ongoing each week. Our field offices, so we have 6 field offices, and we're asking each of the field offices to each week reach out to the community water systems, do a check-in, try to catch early any kind of supply chain disruptions or high absenteeism issues that we can address early. And right now, the field offices, for the most part, as I understand, are fielding questions about alternate sampling locations, helping with monitoring, giving assistance with ideas about startup procedures if you've got a large building and stagnant water that's been sitting in the distribution system, about flushing and startup ideas. We've put some things on our website that deal with essential services. So if you go to the ODW website, we've got some specific links that are designed for the water systems and they, by virtue, the wastewater systems as well. So there's a template letter there that if anyone needed to create or wanted some help to create an essential employee letter so that you wouldn't have to worry about the employee getting stopped and rerouted from going to a water or wastewater treatment plant. There's a form and template letter that we've gotten from the EPA. We also have some other documents on our website that describes and discusses from the EPA and from Homeland Security about the essential nature of drinking water. So that's on our website. There's also some emergency funding options with another sister agency, Department of Housing and Community Development has some emergency funding, so we've posted that on our website. So mostly we're focused on communication and monitoring the COVID-19 situation and doing our emergency support function 3 responsibilities. The other sort of new idea that's developed here in Virginia that may be getting rolled out nationally, but it started here in Virginia with our Abington field office, is a concept called enhanced remote telesurveys. And so what we're trying to do in that spirit is we're required to perform on-site inspections. And under the current environment with the state of the emergency, we've suspended the routine field work that we would normally be doing. And so the Abington field office brought up a concept of, well, if we can't go there in person, what would be the next best thing? And so what we've come up with is this enhanced remote telesurvey. And what that means is one of our engineers or one of our environmental health specialists, inspectors, depending on the system type, whether it's groundwater, consecutive system, surface water, will do some prep work, reviewing the files, the last inspection, reach out to the operator, the facility, schedule an hour-and-a-half time where everybody can work together to go through the history of the facility. And they're also trying to use some unique options like using FaceTime or some other option where you can do video in real time, and our staff will look at certain critical system inline features, get certain pictures, have that sent, and then we follow that up with what would be our normal, these are our inspection findings. And so although it doesn't substitute for the in-person inspection, and we would still need to do that, we've had a lot of good experience with working with the operators at several facilities and seeing things in real time, as well as getting some pictures of certain things and trying to make sure that the public can continue to have confidence that there's multiple checks in the system with making sure that our water quality and our water supply is safe. And so we've shared that with the Region 3 EPA, and EPA Region 3 moved that forward to its headquarters office. And I understand that the WECA, the Office of Enforcement and Compliance Assurance at EPA, is looking to use that as perhaps something to use as a model for rolling out for EPA programs nationally. So I think that speaks well of Virginia. I think speaks well of our Abington field office. And I really do appreciate those facilities that have participated in the pilot in trying to make the telesurvey work. And so if you haven't had that experience yet, it may be coming depending on when your inspection is scheduled. So we're doing these on when the inspections are routinely scheduled and trying to use it to the extent that we can. We're not using it on transient non-community systems. So mainly because those types of facilities are closed right now and they're smaller in nature. So we're using it for the larger systems. And Ike, I'll close out with that and see if there's anything else I can do to help.
All right, sir, we appreciate it. I'm sure you're going to get some questions as we get going here. I want to give Jeff Steers an opportunity to speak also. Jeff, do you have any comments for, especially around the wastewater community, what you might want to share with them?
Sure. Thank you for inviting me to participate. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. So a couple of things I wanted to cover today is what DEQ's doing in the area of operations of the agency and field work, as well as some guidance that we put out there regarding flexibility in compliance and enforcement discretion and the issuances of waivers under Executive Order 51 that the governor had put out. First of all, we are lucky that we've had a good infrastructure of being able to work teleworking and working from remote locations before all this started. Just as an agency, we've supported that. So close to 90% of our staff are actually working from home right now. And that includes field staff that are actually been able to take the opportunity to catch up on some things that they needed to do that they haven't had time to do, and catching up on reports and things like that. We have an internal subsection of our leadership team that has we call our pandemic response team, but it's basically to go through all the issues that come up in operations of the agency, as well as in working and interacting with our regulated community and our stakeholders on DEQ's response to COVID-19. So that's a regular daily thing that we do, that I'm on, that we kind of work through issues as they come up and try to proactively deal with things. We are open for business, even though we're mostly telecommuting. We really don't have the public coming into our buildings or our facilities at all, but you know, we are practicing social distancing and all those things. And we're trying to encourage, and we've been doing a lot, obviously, like this with doing telework, being able to have conference calls with our permittees and facilities, and try to continue to do the regular business of the agency. We did suspend field work when this all started, and have, for the most part, have had staff that normally do inspections or monitoring still working from home. We did open that up a little bit. And we've got protocols for health and safety when our staff are going to be out in the field. And right now we're doing our ambient air monitoring program, our groundwater surveillance program, especially in the coastal plain aquifer on the east and the eastern shore, as well as our, I said air monitoring, and our surface water investigation team, which involves doing our stream gauging throughout the state. We are going to continue to look to slowly implement other field activities as we can do it in a safe manner with our staff and with those that we interact with, respecting the requirements that our facilities have for folks coming on to their property or to their facilities. So that will continue to evolve, but as things go forward. With respect to compliance, enforcement, discretion, and waivers, and I'll start with waivers, which there's, you know, the agency heads have the ability to issue waivers to certain requirements. It requires secretary approval. So in our case, the Secretary of Natural Resources has to would confer with David Paler, our director, on anything that we would want to waive in advance. I will say the bar for that is pretty high, even though we're given the circumstances we're in. I think generally we're going to be dealing with things on the back end if you find yourself in a non-compliance issue, rather than just blanketing approval or blanket waivers of certain requirements or permit requirements or regs. And, you know, the one that we just issued, we've only done one so far, is the ability for regulated medical waste that's generated at some of the pop-up testing centers to be able to have that collected and temporarily stored by VDH. There's some requirements that wouldn't be able to be met, and given the nature of this, it's appropriate to waive some of those requirements. We haven't given any other blanket waivers or approvals to any of our requirements. We've gotten several inquiries from folks in all of our media, the air, water, and waste programs to, anticipating a problem that hasn't happened yet, but may happen and asking for some relief, or there's some active things going on with not being able to meet some of the requirements in their permits, or to delay certain activities, for example, stack tests for facilities that have to do that in the air world. So we are taking those on a case-by-case basis. We anticipate being able to have flexibility on the back end, and so if you can't comply, we'll work with you. We don't anticipate issuing NOVs or warning letters for things that that are COVID related, that you had no control over and that you were trying to plan for in advance. You told us about. We'll work with folks if that means that you missed the deadline for something in a permit. We can do a LOA or something. That's kind of the least informal of our ways to get folks back on track with things. So we've got some guidance that we put out to our programs and to our regional offices that hopefully will help. And we've got this posted on our webpage as well. We have a COVID page, and there's a link to some of that for folks to look at. But again, it's I think we all recognize the situation we're in. The level of what you may or may not be able to do based on looking into the future as the pandemic continues to evolve. We really, there's different levels of how informal or formal we need to be in recognizing that there's the potential for some non-compliance. I know that EDMRs versus hard copies of based on resources of what you may have to do for reporting to the agency. I think that's an example of something where we can be flexible because we're still getting the data, just not in a format that we would normally be required to do. The bottom line too, that I wanted to make sure everybody understands, is the agency still expects permit limits to be made to be met, and that all the appropriate sampling and reporting is in place, so we know, especially if you find yourself out of compliance, we understand what's being put out in a discharge or area emission or that type of thing. So we will continue to provide guidance and tweak this as circumstances warrant. And then the last thing is we've gotten some inquiries for folks that have active consent agreements with us, or consent decrees if it's been filed in a court in the use of force majeure in some of these instances to not be able to meet some of the conditions of an order. And I will say some of the force majeure issues, they vary depending upon the circumstances. It's not general language that is the same across all of our media and all of our orders that we're dealing with. So we're taking these on a case-by-case basis. I know we've had some inquiries from some of the utilities that they're anticipating less revenue maybe in the short term because folks can't pay utility bills and that type of thing. And so they may have compliance schedules that go out and they want to renegotiate those. I think we're open to doing that. That will require us in the water and the wastewater side under the state water pollution control law to public notice these, and potentially depending on the circumstances, they may or may not have to go back to get approval from the board. But at a minimum, we would have to republic notice any compliance schedule changes. And then the last thing I'll say is we suspended all of our board meetings and other public hearings because of the fact that of social distancing issues. We are looking at a few cases where it's an imminent, I wouldn't say threat, but it's an imminent need for the Commonwealth and some of the discretion that may be in some of the executive orders that might allow us to use virtual meetings for public hearings or meetings. We've got at least one case of that in our air program that we're looking at. It's just not an easy thing to just say we can have our State Water Control Board meeting done virtually. So we suspended those meetings. I think we're into June still with the next State Water Control Board meeting. And that's all I have. Thanks.
Oh, very good. I believe Scott had something he was going to bring up here. All right, so we had a question posted, and I'm hoping not stepping on Scott here. We had a question posted about farming out samples. We send out our NH3 analysis to contract labs out of state. If the labs can't process our samples, can we use alternate tests on site even though we aren't VLAP certified? That's going to be a question to you two gentlemen.
Well, I'll just take on the wastewater side. I think, again, we'll have to look on these on a case-by-case basis and an explanation as to why it can't be VLAP certified. And again, we're not going to, at least our agency isn't going to just waive that requirement in advance. So we'll have to sit down and talk through how we would deal with that.
On the drinking water side, generally speaking, we're following the same sort of logic path that DEQ is on. The first issue is there is no waiver of any of the federal requirements on the drinking water side. So all the sampling, all the monitoring is still required. And if you don't meet the sampling event time frame or the analyte, then that would be technically a violation of the regulations, the federal rules, as well as the state rules. And so then the second tier to that is okay, there's a violation. What are you going to do about the violation? And what you're going to do about it will be case dependent, fact dependent. And if it's related to COVID-19, there is discretion on our end where we can, not pursue that or pursue it in a lesser way, sort of what Jeff was talking about on the DEQ and the wastewater side. So generally speaking, if you're having problems sampling for any reason, the first step is to reach out to our field office, and we have 6 field offices. If you go do the Google search for Office of Drinking Water, Virginia Department of Health, it'll pop up our main web page, and there's a contact us website there. You reach out to the appropriate field office, explain what the problem is, and then our field office staff and team will try to help you work around that problem. And so we've had a couple of situations where people were reporting having problems getting lab work done because of the COVID-19 issue. And in those cases where the people have reached out to our field office, we were able to find alternate labs and workarounds to still meet the sampling event.
And I'll just add from DEQ, the same thing applies with, if you need to talk with us, the best place to start is with one of our 6 regional offices, and with whomever your contact is with DEQ, your inspector or compliance manager. Or you could go, that's the first place to start, but also Jerome Brooks, who's over our compliance programs for the wastewater side, can be helpful as well.
Perfect. So hopefully we were able to answer that question significantly enough for the person that posted it. And Scott, did you want to talk on the VOSH real quick, and then we'll get moving on the slides again?
Sure. Just to make everybody aware, we saw reports last week that the Department of Labor has received, as of last week, about 165 employee complaints. We thought it was worthwhile sharing. The information indicated that the VOSH procedure at this point is to send out a request to the employer, ask for a written response. The one thing that they cautioned with is if they do not receive a written response, a failure to get back to them, their current procedure is to convey that to local law enforcement. So it's something to be cognizant of for all of our utilities, that workplace safety investigations, as with DEQ and VDH, may not be active and on site. However, if you receive communication from VOSH asking about any particular complaint, it's very important that those be responded to appropriately.
Okay. And then I'm just going to circle back around to the lab. Somebody posted that it's extremely rare that a regulated analyte is not available at numerous commercial laboratories. There's a great lab locator tool on the VELT page, so you guys definitely can take a look at that. All right, Geneva, I'll turn the slide deck back over to you now. Yep, we just talked about this one. So back on the warrant updates, so far we haven't had any requests. Here's our forward-facing page, giving information to both warrant members, non-warrant members, anybody that's looking. As we brought out last time, if you're an organization that wants to help the utilities out, whether you're a consulting company, a supply company, or something like that, please let us know, and we'll try and get your information out here. We'll make a way for people to get a hold of you to see what services you can offer to them. Okay. So we talked about the VOSH site inspections, continuity of operations. So this is another thing utilities need to be looking at, both water and wastewater, is your continuity of operations plan. Start diving into that. What are we doing to go in depth on our problems that we're having? We talk about operator shortages, but we also need to be talking about our maintenance shortages, our engineering shortages, our admin shortages. As these people as folks are working from home, is that meeting the needs we have? Because I know some people are working from home, but they don't have connectivity to some of the important portals, and they have to come back in. Is everybody hearing me right now?
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing, it actually applies. We got a question coming in on continuity of operations. The question is DEQ guidance, Part 4, to be interpreted that if a system has an employee that is contracted COVID-19, this should be conveyed to DEQ even though there is no current issue in adequate staffing to perform proper operations. So, Jeff, I don't know if you want to jump in on any required notification or from DEQ or VDH for employee.
So I think if you have a confirmed an employee that's confirmed with COVID-19, that's a confirmed case, that the agency would want to know about that, just again as part of your overall staffing, that you've got that situation, and that could lead to obviously reduction in workforce, and what's the plan to deal with that. I think with all of anything proactively that we can get, that you all document, will be helpful to us in making decisions about the potential for future compliance issues.
On the drinking water side, I would say it's very similar to what Jeff was talking about. So we're asking each of our field offices to reach out to the community systems and the public water systems in their region once a week on some frequency that's appropriate and not overbearing. And again, we're asking for two pieces of information. One is the health and the ability for operators to continue to provide drinking water. And then second, are you having any supply chain issues or problems with your supply chain? And then what happens with that information each week as it develops is I either report it through to the Virginia Department of Emergency Management as necessary. I elevate it through the chain of command at the Virginia Department of Health. And if necessary, I can also elevate the issue to the EPA regional office if resources are necessary. So really what we're doing is just monitoring, making sure that we're catching things early, and whatever assistance is needed, we start to work on that as soon as possible. to date, the issues that have been that we've heard about relative to operator absenteeism, it's been some operators, some at this facility, one operator at this facility exhibited some COVID-19 symptoms. We don't know whether it is or it isn't. The person didn't qualify or couldn't get the test. Right now, we've got adequate coverage. And here's what we did. We did some enhanced cleaning of the work areas, and we've got these other things as part of our continuity plan. We're not having a problem right now. And so it's more, right now, we're learning about it, we're hearing about it, but it hasn't impacted operations to date from what we're hearing.
Perfect. One thing I do want to emphasize here for everybody, you can definitely send your request through the WARN, send your request through Virginia Rural Water for Operators, but you also need to be making sure that you're pinging your local emergency managers, because all emergencies, and we're in an emergency state, since all emergencies have to start local so they can get fed into WebEOC and they can make their way up the chain and be handled at whatever level they are, especially when we start looking at numbers and the criticality of numbers and getting things filled. Make sure you are working with your local emergency management organization to get your stuff put in. But by all means, reach out to us. We can start working the process. And if you're not sure who to get a hold of, you get a hold of us and we'll get a hold of them for you. And then I see a question here about can the health department set up to have operators tested? I'm assuming you mean tested for COVID, or ways to have this done locally. That's a great question. I think right now most of the testing is being handled locally. Dwayne, do you want to weigh on that? I know that's outside of an ODW question. It's more an actual EPI question.
Yeah, there's nothing specific oriented to operator sampling. I think the testing that's going on is generally what you're hearing on our epidemiology side of the program, and so I'll be stepping a little bit off my lane, out of my swim lane to talk about that. But generally speaking, if you go to the main health department webpage for their COVID-19 response, the Office of Epidemiology is putting out the information on to the medical providers about when to test and those sorts of things. And so that's probably the best place to get that kind of information.
So I think it's important, and I'll level it to you guys too, and we'll reemphasize it where we can, the importance that local health departments understand the criticality of the water and the wastewater operators as part of this first response to keep things moving forward for the public. And I think that's kind of where some of the generalized emphasis is at about testing, is making sure that these folks are identified as critical to the infrastructure environment. Okay. So we talked about the certificates from VDH ODW. I don't know if Dwayne had any more you want to say on that, but some of the things that we talked about with employee morale is also, we're doing these things, the ugly mask contest. We had a great post on there where somebody said their local town manager, city manager, county manager did a little 2-minute thank you video for all the operators reaching out to them. It was really good. But also we want to make sure we've activated our employee assistance programs. So any mental health concerns, emotional issues going on, that we're reaching out, because these operators are working some extended hours, especially as we move closer to the center of this. They're working a lot more. They're pushing a lot more because they want to do right by the citizens, and we want to make sure we're doing right by all of our operators. We got a question there about what is your utility doing? Please post in chat. If we don't get to them all, we're definitely going to collect them and put them in as some best business practices. One of them is we're purchasing lunches and breakfasts for those individuals, making sure they're bagged, of course. That's a great comment. And doing it at least once a week. They might not be able to do it every day, and I do apologize background noise here. They may not be able to do it every day, but they do it at least once a week, showing their appreciation. So there's a lot of things out there we can be doing around that. Again, around our safety issues, this is getting back to not just the PPE piece, but making sure we're maintaining a safe and secure environment for employees, both on the cyber side and on the physical side. If you're having PPE and material shortages, I believe that's going to be one of our next poll questions. Geneva?
Yep, give me one moment. I'll get that pulled right up.
Oh, yes, ma'am. Yeah. So what we're looking for here, we've kind of got this question, I think, broke down in two ways. And this is one of those benchmarks that EPA and AWWA National keeps looking at, is where we're starting to see our shortages. How are those shortages impacting us as utilities on both sides, water and wastewater? Are we seeing those? We know we're seeing some chemical issues in our supply chain, but are we also seeing like parts impact? We can't get parts that we normally get. We can't get hand sanitizers. We can't get the masks. We can't get all the stuff that we're being told we need to do the business, and then see if we can't share that information out across with everybody. So this first question is around the actual method in which we're ordering supplies. So let's say we can't get all of our chlorine from one place. We're now splitting our chlorine up across 2 or 3 suppliers to get it in there. Or we can't get our gloves, not the vinyl ones or the latex ones, but we can't get regular gloves because everything's out. You know, how are we going about doing that? Or any other materials that we need. All right, so 33 are saying they had to change the quantity because they can't maintain the quantities from people. 55% are saying that they're having to use multiple suppliers to meet their demand. 42% are saying they can't find vendors to supply them some of the critical items they need. And then 25% of you are doing good with what you have in the way of materials on hand. Okay. We'll move on to our next. Oh, go ahead.
You ready for the next poll, or you want to just talk a bit on the supply?
You can go ahead and you can put the poll up while I talk about this slide. So this one is the categories of supplies where we're starting to see those impacts. So we have treatment plant chemicals, distribution chemicals, you know, whether you're using the hockey pucks when you're going out doing line maintenance or you're doing something else. Are you able to get the materials to clean up a spill area, especially on the wastewater side, what you need, the limes and everything. Are we having problems getting parts and pipes, valves, or anything else? Maybe your issue is actually about getting those outside contractors, those ones that are servicing your generators, your forklifts, pumps and motors inside your plant that you don't have the staff that normally does it, and you're having trouble finding those contractors because they don't want to come out. Or if you have other issues that you're running into, if you can put those in the chat window for us. Okay. So
you got a good number of
HRSD,
chats in there. Mm-hmm.
Yep. So I've got one question here about, does anybody have a good way to handle like septic callers and stuff coming on, how they're dealing with that? One of the other ones is HRSD just got Amazon to recognize us as an essential service and allow us to order bulk. I know that's one of the ones that we were fighting through before, because priority is going to hospitals, EMS, fire, and then police, trying to get identified as a critical customer. So if anybody's having issues with that, maybe we can put you in contact with somebody from HRSD if they're willing to help work that process, tell us what they had to go through. So we'll definitely deal into that some more.
Hey, question.
And yes, sir.
I'm on a Zoom webinar. I've been on it for a while, and then all of a sudden I lost all my audio.
Well, Mike, we can hear you again.
And I went out of the system, even shut down the computer, and then tried to come back on.
I don't think he's talking to us.
These
yep.
I'll try and talk over Mike. So our poll results that came back. So 3% of you are having problems getting treatment plant chemicals. About 1% of you are having troubles getting distribution chemicals. 81% are having issues around actual getting PPE. And 89% are having issues around cleaning and sanitization products. 1% around critical components, parts, pipes, valves. And 5% are having impact from outside contractors. So I'm sure there's more of us that are seeing that, and we're going to see what we can do to try to get you some materials, hook you up with the right people, some contacts to help you fill some of those voids. And I thank HRSD for what they posted on about Amazon. And then so around the part with visitors like septic haulers, so one of the things we need to make sure we're checking is, so like when they come in, they show us a photo ID, and we're trying to social distance. Are we making them show us their face behind the mask to make sure they match up with the ID? Have we set up, here's somebody, they said they set up a drop box for our septic haulers to limit contact with the operators, and that they sent this out in a memo asking companies to communicate that to the drivers to ask that we do not enter our buildings. So there's an example. We'll make sure we capture these and we get these on some of our FAQ type stuff. Okay. Next slide. All right. So some of the things that we talked about around modification to operations, and we have another a poll question here on demand, is so some of you had stated on the first week that you were seeing where your bedroom community type utilities are seeing a bigger increase in water production, going through more chemicals than you normally would go through on a Monday through Friday. And some of you are stating that with your industries being closed, your schools being closed, that your demand is actually dropped. So we just want to see how much of an impact we're having. This is going to kind of help us drive an economic understanding of what's going out in the area. So what we have is we have an increase from 20% down to 10%. You have no change. You have a decrease from 10% to 20%. And then if you're something other than one of those, if you could put it in the chat. And I see Michael's comment there, and that's one that we're actually going to talk about the extensive flushing. So one of the things that we were talking about, especially around schools, shopping centers, those places that you typically use a lot more water than what they are before we go back into operation. What are we doing to flush those out, especially around lead and copper roll pieces, making sure, especially with the schools, we're not letting that water sit stagnant. At what point do we start flushing? Are we flushing now? Are we waiting till we hear closer to the end of this that we're going to start flushing? Some of us just need to move the water because that water's sitting stagnant at the end of some of our lines. And then, what is our plan? How have we planned that into our operational piece? All right. So our poll question, 49% of you you're saying no change, either in increase or decrease. Most of the changes are around that 10% mark. Either 11% are seeing an increase and 19% are seeing a decrease in usage. And then 15% decrease at 11%. So this is kind of about where we figured that we'd be within that 10-15% right now. And these are numbers that we're going to try to keep an eye on as we keep moving throughout these webinars to see how we're doing. Close this. So sampling throughout the system, are we still going out and we're pulling samples from those locations that are kind of sitting dormant just to kind of see what the water's doing? Are we going out and doing those samples at the same rate that we were doing them before? That's something we need to think about. Okay.
One other comment to make on this slide here, we do have some information on the website, on the resource page specific to flushing the systems and returning systems that have been dormant for an amount of time, specifically around Legionella, and a few other guidance documents that have come from CDC. So if anybody is looking for assistance as they start addressing these specific issues, there are resources on the webpage.
And we're going to get Mike back on the line here, but especially around Legionella, we're seeing some information come out on that. So we definitely want to get back on the flushing and start getting ahead of some of these problems before they get worse. Mike, do we have you back?
Back now.
Right.
Can you hear me?
Jim Cherry yes, sir. Jim Cherry from Virginia Beach is saying, we are front loading our water distribution compliance sampling due to uncertainty of staffing in the next 30 days. Okay. Anybody else looking at that same way of handling things. Mike, did you have something you want to speak on this one? We were just kind of talking about the Legionella and the flushing program, trying to get these systems back up.
Yesterday, we started looking at our large pipe areas for fire flow protection by our industrial and commercial zones. And we started pulling chlorine residuals and started pulling, doing some flushing to get the chlorine residuals back up to where they should be. I've checked with the county schools, and some of the high schools are being used for food prep. So those have been helping along with that. But we're trying to figure out how we're going to notify all our commercial and retail and industrial facilities to do some flushing internally before they start back into production or serving customers.
Perfect. Dwayne, are you still on the line? Are you working with, through the field offices, are you working to try to help identify some of these with the utilities, especially if they start getting shorthanded? Is there a staffing process that you guys are trying to help them with, or a criticality process that you're trying to help them with to identify the ones that need to come back on first? I'm not saying that you have that answer. I'm just trying to think.
Yeah. So it's a great question, Ike. And I think what's going on is each of the field offices, like I was saying earlier, is having those weekly check-ins with the community water systems. And I know in the Virginia Beach area, with some of the conversations there with Dan Horn, they've been talking about this very specific issue. We have guidance that we've posted on our website. I think Geneva already mentioned that there's some guidance on the Warren website. And so really what I would encourage is continue that conversation with the technical experts in our field offices and identify those facilities, schools, office buildings, hotels, motels, whatever it may be that's been sitting dormant for a while, and using the best practices to try and have those systems start up.
Yeah. Because kind of what I'm seeing is, as we move farther down, some of these systems may become sheltering locations, and we're going to need to do what we can to get them ready to go. And then Russ from Henrico, I don't want you thinking you got missed. Russ from Henrico, he also says that Henrico is front loading our sampling process, not knowing what's going to happen over the next 30 days. Okay, Jeff, did you want to weigh in here from DEQ on any of this? I'm not trying to throw you under the bus, I promise you.
Sorry about that, Adam. No, I think working with our regional offices and keeping us in the loop as to what shortages you're having and anticipating issues. I will reach out to Jerome Brooks, and who's obviously oversees our compliance programs for wastewater, and see if there's other guidance that he wants to share with y'all, and I can get back and send an email back for distribution.
Perfect. Okay. All right. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide for the sake of time. I appreciate you guys hanging with us as long as you have. So we kind of talked about this economic impact piece, trying to keep track on where you guys are seeing things. So one of the questions we had is, anyone changing the way they're doing billing or their collection process, and not so much around Dropbox, but are you staying your billing, or your billing still going out on a routine manner to try and get in the monies that you can get in, and then those that are in the having economic issues, are we offering or letting them know ahead of time that there are some processes or some venues in place to help them get back in track? And that was kind of what this one is. So it'd be good for you to start thinking, if you haven't thought about that, to start working that. I would imagine most of us at this point, I apologize. I imagine most of us at this point have looked at what this looks like as far as trying to get our billing cycle back in check and trying to get those customers back online. Obviously, at this time, we can't turn water off for services, but if the governor lists the order on June 10th, we don't want to be going out turning water off on June 11th for people who are just getting back to work and haven't got a paycheck yet. So just, do we have that money in reserve to keep going and this is a question that Dwayne and I were talking about, and I'll try and get some more information from those venues to get out there on some of the stuff that may be offered to help utilities out. Okay. All right. Next slide. All right. Russ Navarone says Henrico is covering the fees for those that are paying by credit card. So they're covering that cost for folks. Okay. So I saw a lot of really good information come out in the chat window. And so if anybody would like to share that information on one of the next webinars, kind of talk about best business practices, we'd love to have some of the other utilities start weighing in and be able to speak as a panelist. Like I said, next week, we're going to have Tricia Henshaw from DPOR. She's going to be on here. She's going to talk about operator licensing issues, CEUs, the extension of the licensing renewal process. And she did say for you guys to go and check out the DPOR webpage to see what they have out there already. Okay.
And we do have that link on our resource page if someone needs to get directly to it and can't find it on the DPOR page. You can go to the WARN resources and go directly into DPOR's waivers and their variations specific to COVID.
Gotcha. And I really do apologize about all the background noise. I'm up here at one of the military operations centers, so it got a little hectic during this webinar. Mike, Steve, do you have anything you want to say to the group?
I'm good. I think we covered everything.
Okay.
There is one last question that just came in the chat window specifically to address to VDH. I don't know if somebody would like to ask Dwayne. If not, we can get to him after.
Yep. If Dwayne's on, I'll ask it real quick. If he needs time to formulate an answer, then we'll get that out. Can VDH raise utility revenue impacts and utility expenses with administration for purpose of allotment of federal relief funds coming to utilities? I think that's one of the things you and I kind of talked a little bit on, but we didn't really get deep on.
Yeah. So what I do know is that the EPA Region 3 folks are talking with the FEMA folks on trying to release and allow for utilities that have a financial impact from the COVID-19 to apply for emergency relief. And I believe that FEMA is willing to consider those requests through that kind of application process. So I will see if I can get some more details around that topic. It's sort of an emerging, more recent discussion that we've had with EPA Region 3, but you would be applying through the FEMA process, not through anything on the drinking water side. And then separate from that, I think that's the primary relief for something like is being described with loss of revenue.
Gotcha. And then I see Virginia itself will control $3.2 billion of the first federal allotment directly to states. Okay. And that's same from the thing. So for those of you that I wasn't able to get through all your chats and everything you have in there, please feel free to email either myself, Mike Lynn, or Scott Shirley. Our contact information is right here, and we'll make sure that we get that information off to Jeff and Dwayne and try to work an answer. Right now, there's still a lot of unknowns, and these are the things we're trying to work through. And I really do want to thank Jeff and Dwayne for being on here today. I think it meant a lot to the utilities and those that were listening to hear from you guys. And we hope to have you guys back if you guys are available.
Appreciate the invitation to be able to share. And again, reach out if there's anything that DEQ can help.
Gotcha. And
thank
Jessica, we will make sure that we share your contact. Oh, thank you, sir. All right. Geneva, do you have anything else before we close out?
That's all. We'll be going ahead and closing the webinar recording as well as the YouTube stream. There have been comments posted into the chat window. You're welcome to take a look at that. Some final thoughts here at the end. And if not, please just reach out to one of us with any questions you might have. Thanks again. And everybody, remember, we are doing this on a weekly basis. So mark your calendar every Wednesday at 1 p.m. for the foreseeable duration of the pandemic.
Thank you very much for everybody. Thank you for all your patience.